Transresistor Radio.
You are listening to Transresistor Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Franz. My website is ageoftransitions.com. Please check out the website to subscribe to this podcast. I have an RSS feed. You can subscribe using iTunes. You can use Stitcher Radio for mobile devices, or you could just download the episodes directly at ageoftransitions.com. So please check out the website. Thank you for listening to this podcast, and thank you very much for subscribing. As promised, today on the show, I have another guest back, and it's a welcome thing having guests at all, let alone this return guest who's been on before, and I'm very happy to have him back again. Today's guest is Pearse Redmond, and his website is porkinspolicyreview.com. You're going to want to check out his website and listen to his podcast, Porkins Policy Radio. It's a very good podcast, covers a lot of different issues, good stuff going on there. So, yeah, I really can't recommend it enough. And a few months back on Porkins Policy Radio, Pearse and I spoke about the topic of cults, and we focused on California cults. And here today, we pick up a little bit on the same conversation, keep going with the same topic of cults. And I asked Pearse a few questions about it because he's been doing quite a bit of research lately into cults, particularly Scientology. So we talk about Scientology and much more to do with just cults generally today on the show. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy this interview, and thank you very much for listening. Okay, so welcome back to the show, Pearse Redmond.
Thank you for having me back on, Aaron. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and I've been looking forward to this podcast for a little while.
Yeah, this is going to be a good show, and I'm glad to have you back on, and glad to be talking to you about a subject that we already have discussed on your show. We talked a bit about California cults, and so that was specific to the area that I'm in here. Southern California seems to be a mecca for cults. But there's cult activity is so interesting, and it's so important and a misunderstood and overlooked topic for sure. And I know that you've been looking into the topic a lot lately. So I'll just start by asking, is there any sort of particular things that you've been focusing on in your research as of late?
Sure, yeah. I think my main focus right now has been Scientology. And Scientology is something that even years and years before I got into the alt-media movement, I was always fascinated by Scientology. And it was always one of these subjects for a while when, back like when I was in high school and even before that, it was always sort of like a taboo subject. People didn't talk about science, or people didn't seem to think it was all that weird. It was sort of that's that weird, group that Tom Cruise and Travolta and a couple other people are in. But for me, at least, as someone who loved, film and was always fascinated by Hollywood, it always struck me as, extremely bizarre that people sort of dismissed this bizarre, quote, religion based around Xenu and aliens and thetans inhabiting our bodies, and it's pretty crazy. And to think that they're so powerful and that they control so many aspects of Hollywood, I was always interested by that. And as of lately, there's been quite a lot in the news regarding Scientology. We have this new movie, Going Clear, coming out this Sunday on HBO. Which will be really fascinating, and I would definitely encourage everybody who can to go and watch it, because it really will be a great movie, and it's got a lot of excellent former members, high-level people from Sea Org speaking out about this. But Scientology is always fascinating me again in that sort of that mixture between Hollywood, the intelligence services, and cults as well, and all three of those at times intersect with Scientology. So I think that's fascinating. And I mean, just more broadly speaking, as you said, I mean, the subject of cults, and particularly destructive cults, because, we can kind of parse out what is a cult, what isn't a cult, but really destructive cults are quite fascinating and how they operate. So, yeah.
I guess real quick, how does a destructive cult operate, would you say?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, there are different definitions for what a destructive cult would be, but, you know, I mean, we can look at a cult broadly and, you know, we can say, oh, well, you know, Islam is a cult, Christianity is a cult, you know what I mean? But, I would say a destructive cult is an organization where you can't really leave. You know, you can be, I was raised Catholic. But I no longer really practice as a Catholic, and it's not as if the church is knocking on my door and dragging me to some sort of prison. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you leave Scientology, not all the time. Obviously, this is different if you're like a public Scientologist, which would, you know, that's what me and you would be if we joined. But people who are in Sea Org, people who are in essentially the clergy of Scientology, they're not really allowed to leave. And they can be dragged back. So that's one thing. I would say also, I mean, just sort of more broadly speaking, you know, a destructive cult will be a cult where there is a guru. There is someone who is in charge, and what he says is, that's it. There is no defying that. There's, you know, in a destructive cult, you'd have some sort of book that would, you know, you would have to adhere to, and that anything within that book is scripture. This is the absolute truth. So, you know, in Scientology, you have things like Dianetics. Mm-hmm. You have, you know, as you go up, you are handed certain documents that Hubbard wrote. You know, the most famous one, of course, that everyone knows about is OT3, which is where you learn about Xenu and Thetans and things like that. But you know, that's across the board in all sorts of different cults. There are aspects like that. And again, I mean, a destructive cult is a cult where you're giving a lot of your money away. Yeah. Your entire life is spent and devoted to the cult, and you are willing to do things which you wouldn't normally do within the cult, or if you weren't in the cult. You know, so this is things like stealing and lying and, you know, hurting people. So that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, the cult just sucks the individual dry. All the people who are members of it completely uses all its members for the cult leader's benefit, or just the cult, generally speaking, its own benefit. Yes. So it's a parasitic organization for sure.
Yes.
And then with Scientology, I know that I listened to you say recently that a lot of people have this idea that the CIA kind of created it, but you have a different opinion. The CIA is involved, right? But they didn't create it?
Yeah, this is a common theory within the alt media, and you know, if you quickly, you know, Google like Scientology conspiracy theories, you will see, you know, countless websites devoted to Scientology being some sort of MK Ultra program and things like that. And I understand the kind of reaction, the desire to want to link Scientology directly to the CIA, but I don't. I guess for me, I just haven't seen anything that really completely sways me to this opinion. And I think that instead, obviously, you know, we were just talking off air before, there are cults that are deeply tied to the intelligence network, like the Unification Church, the Moonies, as they're called, directly. I mean, the CIA was using them to run things like Radio Free Asia, and they use them as a go-between between the Central Intelligence Agency in America and the South Korean Intelligence Agency, which coincidentally is also called the CIA. But with Scientology, I think that this was more something that was massaged, you know, that was sort of encouraged by the CIA at certain points. Now, Scientology has had this very public battle against groups like the FBI, the IRS, you know, the CIA as well, in particular. And I think this was real. I think the FBI really was trying to get rid of Scientology, or trying to shut it down. And then, of course, there's the famous Operation Snow White, where Scientology infiltrated, like, it was the biggest infiltration of the federal government ever by any particular group. But again, then we have in the 1990s, I think it was, I want to say 1993, the IRS eventually settles with the church and grants it an incredible, not just like tax exemption, but it allows schools that are run by Scientology to be tax exempt. 80% of individual auditing which is the Scientology practice, that's tax deductible. It allows for Scientology to basically give tax-exempt status to organizations it sets up in foreign countries. Now, no one has that kind of power, really. I mean, there's no sort of group that the IRS gives tax exemption status to that can basically say, oh, sure, in whatever country, they're tax exempt. And the IRS even sent out letters to foreign countries explaining that this is what was going on. So on that level, there is some sort of guardian angel that is sort of looking out for Scientology. And I think that's when the CIA comes into play maybe more directly. But, Hubbard, I think, was much too paranoid and much too terrified of the federal government that he would have never gotten in bed with any of them. Whereas the current leader, psychopath David Miscavige, definitely would have no qualms whatsoever with getting in bed with the CIA.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, clearly the federal government and the intelligence agencies have some sort of use or relationship for these cults, and they use them somehow. They're convenient groups for them. Would you say this is true, and how so?
Oh, of course. I think absolutely. And I mean, with Scientology, we had in the 70s two very prominent Scientologists, Ingo Swann and, oh God, I'm forgetting the other name, but it'll come back to me. But anyway, they ran a very elite project out of the Stanford Research Institute where they were doing psychic research. So the CIA had no problem with hiring two prominent cult members to run programs with like Uri Geller and remote viewing and all sorts of things like that. So yeah, of course, I think that more broadly speaking, cults are great for the intelligence agency because you have a very pliable group of people. You have with Scientology, the whole thing is that they're saving the world. They are clearing, quote, the world. They're making, everybody better through Scientology. So if you can use that kind of, that's a great sort of, entree into whatever you want to do. So again, if you take a cult like the Moonies and you have the higher ups telling the lower people within the Moonies that, oh, okay, running Radio Free Asia, this is good because you're doing God's work. You have a very, these people will, oh, sure, totally, yeah, whatever. You can, it's also a great, I think, a breeding ground for experiments. You can see, what can you do? That's something, I think, with like Jim Jones and the People's Temple had something to do with, seeing, what can you make people do? Yeah,
that kind of ties back to the MK Ultra mind experiment idea as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the other thing too. MK Ultra wasn't just shooting people up with LSD. Some of this was also things like trauma-based mind control, hypnosis, which of course Hubbard loved hypnosis, and in the 40s and 50s when he was sort of developing Dianetics, he hypnotized lots of people all the time. And indeed, I think that's a lot of what the early Dianetics and these sort of quote breakthroughs that Hubbard had to do with hypnosis and with hypnotizing people and then getting them to say things under hypnosis that kind of proved what he was trying to say with Dianetics. So I think you're talking about a group that can be easily manipulated, and that's not meant as a put down, by people that are in a cult, in a destructive cult. But it, again, you can be made to do things that you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah,
and it's and when you have a group like the CIA, you can be made to do things that are just, really reprehensible.
Yeah, it's the same concept with the way that the CIA would use terrorist groups to pull off terrorist events. The individual members of a terrorist group have this idea of a jihad or some sort of religious mission that they're saving the world, but they're total extremists. And so the intelligence agencies get them to do their dirty work, right?
Oh yeah, you could definitely. I would definitely label things like Al Qaeda as a cult in some degree. You've got people, Bin Laden, Zawahiri. These are like Muhammad's messengers on earth to these people. What they say is complete. That is gospel. They cannot be wrong.
Yeah.
and they're indoctrinated. They're made to think that, doing this is God's work and all sorts of other things. And then again, you've got people like Bin Laden and Zawahiri who are taking their marching orders from, the CIA and other people as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's definitely a cult, or this cult around death within groups like that, or ISIS. And while the people at the bottom are doing these really brutal things, I think many of them are being indoctrinated, are being brainwashed into carrying out the most horrific sort of acts. I mean, beheading someone is a pretty extreme act. This is not something that you would do lightly. It's much easier to behead somebody if you are brainwashed, if you are meant that this is, positive, I guess.
Yeah, really exactly.
Crazy. But yeah, I mean, you have to think that, there's something more to this. People don't, I doubt a lot of these stories about people, these like, young girls from like Denmark going and joining ISIS. But, people do kind of, there are, I'm sure for every one of those it's fake, there are a couple people that are actually doing this.
Yeah.
And that's the power of a cult, and particularly, cults in the internet. It's very, nowadays it's super easy to get, people to,
pay come attention to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Now, how about just the method of cults, and perhaps Scientology in particular? Have you looked into any sort of the weird practices or mind games that they use in your research?
Oh, yeah. I think this is what makes cults, I think, generally speaking, appealing to a lot of people. There's this real sort of like blame the victim mentality in cults, or in the anti-cult movement. Like, oh, how could you be so stupid?
Yeah.
And generally speaking, these people aren't stupid. These are highly, and especially in Scientology, you're talking about fairly affluent people. Most of them are, white, middle class to upper middle class. Many of the original people, were in college. Nowadays, with Scientology, it's very much like a family business. So a lot of the people in Scientology are born into Scientology. But definitely within that anyway, there is this sort of, with Scientology, there's lots of different aspects that attract people. But one of them is this sort of idea that you will, as you go up in thetan level, in OT level, you will gain sort of superhuman powers. And this is something that Hubbard promoted all the time, that you'll be able to have, complete recall of events, that you'll be able to see, better than other people, that you'll be able to sort of, you'll heal faster. That's another thing. They're talking about you'll heal faster. So that's one thing that I think attracts people. But more broadly speaking, I think there are some things within Scientology that are attractive to people who are, kind of not out there, but are, like in the alternative community. There are people that are looking for more. There are people that are sort of willing to explore different avenues of thought and, contemplation. And within Scientology, there's a lot of that. There's a lot about, repressed memories. There's the whole concept in Scientology of engrams are these sort of negative, emotions, negative thoughts that are implanted within your brain. Now, some of these, you're not even aware of them. And through auditing, they will come out. And some of these have to do with, a lot of the time, engrams all relate back to when you were conceived as a child. So through what I would call hypnosis and auditing, people will begin to see these engrams. And you will see that, when your parents conceived you, it was, your father might have been kind of aggressive or nasty to your mother. They could have been fighting afterwards. Or just simply the act of seeing your parents have sex is really traumatic. Yeah. Just on a broad level, no one really wants to see their parents having sex. So when that does happen, suddenly, this light goes off and, this is why I'm depressed. This is why I have a problem with drinking. This is that, blah, blah, blah. That's, in and of itself, that's an interesting concept. And I do think that there is something to that, there is a psychic energy that can be passed on, through some, like many times, this is not all the time, and I would never want to make a blanket statement, but, the children that are the product of rape can have emotional problems, that's just a thing that, if someone that is, literally giving their seed away is doing it in this violent, horrible manner, that can kind of affect somebody. So that's an interesting thing with Scientology. A lot of that goes back to that moment. They're very obsessed with failed abortions. This is something that Hubbard glommed onto a lot in the 50s. He claimed that he was a product of a failed abortion. He said that he saw his mother's abortion once. And that this caused a lot of problems for people. Now, that's a really interesting concept, that something like that could be imprinted onto your mind. So now, of course, then, Scientology takes that and goes completely crazy with that. And again, it's very easy if you're hypnotizing someone, if they're involved in this process of auditing. Many times, too, when you can't leave, if you're being punished, you can't leave an auditing session. This could go on for hours. It's very easy to implant certain ideas into people. But kind of going back to your original question, I think that there is something fascinating about that concept. And there are things, again, Dianetics, which is a sort of Hubbard sort of gospel about Scientology and all this stuff. I mean, he took from the occult. He was a big follower of Aleister Crowley, and was very interested in, magic and magic rituals and occult symbology. He takes from all those little things and then incorporates them into this bizarre religion about aliens and whatnot. But that's, the occult, that's really interesting. And there's something really powerful about that. Now, of course, he's using this in a black magic sort of a way. In controlling people and using people, but there is a power to that, and I think that attracts a lot of people to it. So that was a really long and complicated response, but
no, I mean, it makes sense. They definitely are tied into the occult as they use occult practices that they pull from that area. And for me, I get a little confused myself when it comes to this side of things, and wondering and speculating, like, okay, what secret society is a secret society and might be okay and acceptable within its own confines, and what secret society, which of them are full-out cults? And you're talking about the dangerous cults we were talking about before. It gets a little foggy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's... on some level, I think that's almost kind of up to people for them to decide. And I know, Aaron, you've been talking a lot on your podcast about TM, the whole Transcendental Meditation movement, and I would definitely consider that, at the very least, cult-like.
Yeah.
If not, within that there are, TM cults for sure that are out there, where you're spending, thousands and thousands of dollars on these intense. TM sessions where you're very susceptible to mind control. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's kind of up to every... Now, again, I mean, like, Scientology is one of these weird ones in that you get a lot of celebrities who are not Scientologists, but speak very highly of it and speak in a way that kind of leads you to being like, well, maybe it is kind of okay. And I would look no further than Jerry Seinfeld, who also apparently loves TM, which I didn't know until you mentioned it. But Jerry Seinfeld in the early 90s took several Scientology courses in auditing, and to this day still credits Scientology with helping him become a better comedian.
Wow.
So, that's the kind of fine line where you can kind of, is it a dangerous secret society, or is it kind of like a goofy, pseudo religion? It's weird, and I think a lot of people kind of have to make that up for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's not always so clear cut. And again, I mean, that's, there are lots of people that go to ashrams that they're not really bad people. They're not necessarily in a destructive cult per se, but there is a guru there. You are listening to what the guru has to say. You are spending most of your money. You're working at the ashram. So I think it's, it's a difficult thing, and I would never want to make that, tell people they can or can't. Because again, that's another thing too. I mean, I would never want to offend anybody that is a former Scientologist, someone that's been in a TM cult. You never know how people really feel and react, and it's difficult. It's not something that you can make up for somebody else.
Yeah. Well, with a lot of the secret society groups, when I'm looking at them, the thing that ends up turning me off about them, like there's a lot of ideas that I can get on board with, I find interesting, but then they throw in a lot of culty sort of things, and they just kind of, their presentation leads me to believe that their actual organization, if you were to join them, would be pretty cultish. I'm like, oh boy, interesting ideas there, but like let's just listen here at home, and that will do it. Thank you very much. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean that's what I mean. I mean, like, there are people that take a Scientology course and are like, oh my god, I stopped smoking. There was there's a pretty good documentary called Secret Lives, which came out in the 90s, which is one of the first sort of real exposés about Scientology. And this was a British documentary. I can't remember who produced it. It might have been like Channel 4 in England. But anyway, they got to interview lots of people personal friends of Hubbard. And the documentary is sort of more or less based around Hubbard. Someone has been leaking the full recordings of these interviews, and you can find them on YouTube pretty easily. I believe the channel is Keep Skepticism Working, something like that. You can also go to Tony Ortega's blog, Underground Bunker, which is like the best source for Scientology. But one of the people interviewed was Hubbard's former press agent. Oh, no, excuse me, not press agent, book agent, who he helped promote Hubbard's science fiction writing. And this was in the 40s. And, for instance, he said through Dianetics that he had this horrible fear of dogs from when he was a little child. He was attacked by a dog. And through a few, auditing classes with Hubbard, he owns like a whole shitload of dogs. He has no problem with dogs.
Sure.
So, there are little positive things certainly within that. But, I'll say that this kind of particular is like, Hubbard's also a nut, and I would never...
Yeah. Well, the thing is that... for Scientology he's drawing on hypnosis and occult concepts and practices that do have verified results. They work. So he employs them, and the employment of them is enough to get people to believe, I suppose, is what happens there. And then a big problem in our modern world is that if you're trying to talk about the subject and explain the bad parts of it, I think people tend to want to think that Scientology would be all bad and that there could be nothing good whatsoever within it. And that confuses our understanding of why people would join at all, because they're joining for the virtuous things, the things that actually do work to help them. And I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that? Like the inability, I guess, for the public at large to relate to this and see the positive side of the cults and therefore not understand anything else deeper about the dark side of them?
I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that people want to project the idea that like we were saying before, that people in cults are crazy, or that they're stupid, or that they're naive. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that there are lots of pseudo-cults that average people are a part of, and they don't want to admit that they're in a cult. And I'll say, from personal experience, I was in what I wouldn't even really call a pseudo-cult, but probably more of a full-blown cult, but that was Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. Oh, yeah. And I was in that for many years, and that is completely a cult. And this isn't to put down people that are still in the program. This isn't, but that definitely employs all of the hallmarks of a cult.
Yeah.
Including gurus and a text that you can't disagree with, and groupthink, group speak. They invent phrases, all sorts of things. They want, they really do indoctrinate you.
Yeah.
So, I think that's part of it. People don't want to admit that they're perhaps in some sort of cult, or that they have cult-like behavior. I mean, look at the way people get during election time.
Yeah.
I mean, chanting, wearing certain colors.
Yes.
The sort of buzzwords and phrases, people think political slogans are just political slogans. But, I mean, hope and change and all that stuff. I mean, that became ingrained into people's minds. And to disagree with that would start this violent reaction.
Yeah.
And that's very much a part of everyday life. And again, I mean, this isn't that, if you're a Democrat or Republican, you're in a destructive cult. But
well, the concept of brand loyalty is the same thing as being in a cult, too. People have cultish tendencies to the things that they buy.
Yes.
It's crazy. Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned the program, as they call it there, because I've had friends in that, or I had one friend I can think of specifically that was a truther, I guess a truther along with me, and he was always saying how that the program was a cult, and he would always still go to the meetings and kind of enjoy kind of being the guy that goes in there and tries to shake things up, but at the same he's always telling me how it's a cult and all that, and I just always found that fascinating.
Oh, it is 100% a cult, I think.
Sure.
And I mean, I'm sure people are going to email me about this later, but that's fine. I mean, I don't care. I mean, I am very adamantly opposed to this. I was indoctrinated into this when I was in high school.
Sure.
So you're at a very young age. And you will hear all of this stuff about how, it's up to you to decide if you're an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And then the second, if you're a child, and they love younger people. They're always like, oh yeah, the younger the better, because then you can be sober the rest of your life and you can live this great life where your entire social life is revolving around going to meetings.
Yeah.
All of your friends are within the program. All you do is smoke cigarettes and bitch about how you can't drink, and you talk about drinking constantly. Which only makes you need to go back to another meeting.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, that in of itself is really is dangerous and cult-like. But yeah, again, I mean, you'll enter and they'll be like, well, it's up to you to decide if you're an alcoholic.
Sure.
But, there's this pressure to want to be accepted. And I think that's another aspect of cults is that you're talking about people that, and I was very, I was kind of insecure to a degree when I was, in the program, and this is a very, very cult-like. You're instantly accepted. The second you say, my name is Pearse and I'm an alcoholic, everyone, again, I mean, there's a hi Pearse, welcome, and you're instantly accepted. Suddenly everyone wants to hang out with you. The first meeting you'll go to, you'll leave with like 50 phone numbers, email addresses, all sorts of things. And again, I mean, I'm not trying to put down people. I understand that there are, the thing is, again, and this is a very, this is like with Scientology or any cult, there's no like minor, you can't really just sort of follow it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's full force. You can't be like a minor, member of, I mean, you can be if you're a celebrity in Scientology, you're allowed certain things, but for the most part, it's all or nothing. Yeah. And that's very much with AA is that they will also make you think that every little thing is much worse and much bigger. So, because again, you'll be in AA, and I mean, there are people in there that I met people that were, started, prostituting themselves to keep drinking. I mean, would, steal from their children, would rob people. I mean, really extreme things. And you're sort of sitting there like, oh, well, I mean, I got drunk at that family party and like made a big ass of myself. And, I was, I threw up at home and my parents found out that blah, blah, blah. But that will then become, they'll all be like, oh, well, I did that too. And then, next thing I was selling, I was, blowing some guy in an alleyway for a pint of vodka. And then you're sort of like, well, oh my God, is this what's going to happen to me? And you develop this mentality in your head, and then everything becomes, all you do is obsess over it.
Yeah. Well, it's all about extremes, isn't it? You're saying when you first join, they're so eager to pull you in that they love bomb you. It's just like, oh yeah, you're the best person. Yeah, you hugs and kisses and all that, or whatever you want to say. You're in there, so you're one of them. But then they terrify the hell out of you too. So it's like this back and forth, and it reminds me of what I've read of trauma-based mind control, where you really take people to extremes and you terrify them to control their mind. It's crazy. I don't know.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's completely. And I mean, again, and then they play up guilt, which is probably, I'd say, the strongest thing, at least within AA, but certainly I would assume in other cults. That's what keeps you going back, is the guilt. You know, you'll hear people talking about that they might leave a cult for, you know, a few weeks, but there's this guilt associated with it. You know what I mean? It's like all of your friends are in the cult, all of your family members are there. You don't want to just, you know, this is a huge thing in Scientology, is this concept of disconnection, where you'll you know, if you leave, your family members will be told to disconnect from you. Yeah. Now, this is similar in AA. It's like if you go out and you drink, there is this first off, there's this fake idea that you are completely powerless. You know, that there is some sort of other spiritual force that's making you drink. So when you do relapse in the program, you're like, oh, well, fuck it, I'm just going to go all out. Yeah. You know, I'm going to get so shit-faced because I can't control myself. You know, This is what they build into your mind. Then you wake up the next day, you feel so guilty and so depressed that, I mean, you contemplate all sorts of horrific things in your mind. Yeah. Then you go back into the program, and come back, but you're kind of, they'll take away the little coin that they gave you for whatever few months of sobriety, and that coin can mean so much to you.
It's crazy. It's set up. It's set up in such a way so that you play out a program. Exactly. In your own head. You play out a drama in your own life, and you're kind of an actor, aren't you, in your own life there, acting out this drama that you don't have to, but the only reason that you did is because you had been suggested, as in post-hypnotic suggestion even, that you fulfill this suggestion that you've been given over and over and over. You're told this line over and over. So, where the mind is, the legs walk, you go in that direction. So, I mean, it's just, that's what's going on, I guess. And I will say that I appreciate your candor here, Pearse, and talking about your experiences, and also admitting the fact that you believe that you were involved in a cult in some sort of way. And I mean, I'll just, I say I do drink now, and that's fine. And I would say for a lot of young people, because you will meet a lot of young people in the program, that they need to kind of really remove themselves from the kind of indoctrination that goes on there. And I think that I was like a depressed teenager. I was also on, like Prozac at the time. So that just totally fucks with your brain. And, I would never advocate that either. Sure. But this is what is so creepy about AA, is that they love kids, I think, because they're so, you can mold them so fast. Yeah. And this is, again, I mean, this is, more and more Scientologists, the really hardcore are children that will sign, they will sign up to be in Sea Org when they're like, 11, 12, 14 years old. When you sign Sea Org in Scientology, which is essentially the clergy, you sign a 1 billion-year contract. You're paid nothing. You are literally, you're lucky to make maybe $80 a week. But you're doing, you're doing good. You are saving the world. And there's similar things in AA about that. And again, then you proselytize, and again, if you leave AA and you stay sober, then you're a dry drunk. And that's like the worst thing that you can be, because that means you're basically, you're as unpleasant and horrible as you are when you're drunk, but you're not drinking. So again, this is like in Scientology. I mean, these are like SPs if you leave, suppressive persons. So it's all the same, all the same thing. It is. Yeah. You need the group. Otherwise you cannot function properly. You need us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And going back to a point you're making earlier, that in this digital age with internet and whatnot, it's so much easier for cult leaders to gain attention for themselves and their little cult and gain membership. Let's return to this. And, how do you see that this is the case? Like, what about internet is rife for the cultivation of cults? I'll say. Let's start there.
Well, I mean, now it's very easy to spread information on the internet. It's very easy to spread bad information. I mean, anyone, and I'm sure your listeners have had to deal with this all the time, with this crazy crap on the internet.
Yeah.
So I think, that's very easy. You no longer have to, you don't have to meet someone on the street who's like, oh, have you ever heard about Scientology? Or, would you like a free personality test? You don't need that sort of face-to-face interaction anymore. We've also, for a variety of reasons, people are so connected to their computers right now, are so, plugged into the matrix, the internet, that, we get a lot of people sitting, in basement, the sort of cliche, in your mother's basement, watching YouTube videos over and over again. So, if you get someone that's very persuasive, talking to you, it's really easy to fall into this sort of mentality. Again, there's lots of sort of, political ideologies out there, that, at certain times, I've been, interested in this or that. And, but then you kind of have to take a step back and sort of remove yourself, because it's really easy, I think, to get roped into, these sort of internet personalities. Just think about, half of Scientology, for instance, is this, you might meet Tom Cruise, there's so many celebrities, you could, Jason Lee or, Christy Alley. Also, this, some people don't know, Jennifer Lopez, her father is like a 25-year Scientologist. Oh. So, and J-Lo is at some of these sort of parties. You might meet J-Lo, something like that, So there's that sort of aspect to it. It's a celebrity. So again, the internet is ripe for, think about how many, idiots make, funny YouTube videos, and suddenly they're on billboards, they're getting paid tons of money by YouTube to, start a series or something like that. So it's I think the internet is just a breeding ground. And there's also just a lot of nuts, there's a lot of crazy people, and there are a lot of people that are looking for some sort of answer. Yes. And, political cults, are very prevalent on the internet. And, and if you are persuasive enough, you can make, people believe the most insane things, and you can use politics, you can use the sort of desire, to make some sort of political change into a cult. So, the internet is great for that.
Yeah. And a lot of people, I know Thomas Sheridan's been talking about this a lot lately. You and I and a lot of others have, been on this concept that the alt media is a rife breeding ground or recruiting ground for cults, because of just kind of the mindset, I guess, that the alternative thinker kind of has. The truth movement member or whatever kind of is already kind of in the mentality that lends them to be a recruit of sorts for cults. What do you think about this?
Oh yeah, definitely. Thomas, I was just listening to the latest episode of The Velocity of Now, and he was talking about this in particular. It's just that the alt media is just, ground zero for these sorts of groups. And I was sort of talking about that before with the kind of the new agey sort of stuff, the kind of occult aspects to a lot of cults is very, it appeals to a lot of people in the alt media who are interested in this, as I am. I know you are. And the power of that sort of stuff, is great. And then again, then there's also the sort of, we're talking about truthers, when you first sort of discover that there's, another side to 9/11, that it wasn't this cult leader bin Laden in a cave with a satellite phone directing the most complicated terrorist attack ever. When I remember for me, learning about P-Tech and that whole aspect of it. And then it's like, the curtains open and you see the secret knowledge, So that's there's so much of that in the alt community and the truthers and stuff like that, that I think, if you can frame this in the right way, again, a lot of the time using political ideology, as you've been covering brilliantly, Aaron, this whole neo-Nazi shit, is that is roped into a political ideology, and there's a lot of people that are attracted to this, and without a doubt, the National Socialism, the Nazi Party in the 30s and 40s was a cult, and again used a lot of occult practices, a lot of occult imagery in order to indoctrinate many of the German people into thinking that they were far superior, that no matter what they did, it was just and good. So it's really easy, I think, in the alt. There's a lot of people out there that are looking for that are looking for answers, and that's a good thing. We should always be questioning. We should always be looking for something. But you can, if you don't disconnect from that, you can find that your entire life becomes absorbed with this, and that's part of the definition of a cult.
Sure. Now, do you believe that there are any people within the truth movement, whatever, out there now that perhaps without their knowledge, they're in a cult already, or they have been for a while? And if so, what would you say to that person? What would you say, like, signs to look out for in yourself, to maybe, like, ask questions of yourself and take a step back, things like that? What would you have to say along those lines?
Oh, yeah. There's lots of, there's the whole, the more extreme sections of the libertarian movement. Again, something that I was somewhat involved in. I went to Liberty Fest in New York City. I still listen to certain people within the movement that I think are actually good and truthful. But there's the extreme angles of that, like people like Stefan Molyneux, who runs like Free Domain Radio. I mean, he definitely is a cult leader.
Yeah.
And again, this is like. There's like average people that like watch his videos and like them on YouTube. Yeah. There's people that participate in the forums, like on FDR, and then there are people that are like communicating with Molyneux on a daily basis. There are people that quote that do his defooing practice. So he's even got these sort of fake cult words, which is basically means to disconnect from your entire family and friends. Anybody that's not his brand of insane libertarianism.
Wow.
You must defoo. You must complete, because your parent. And then he's built in this whole crap about how all parents are abusive.
Oh my goodness.
And that only it was only him coming along and inventing peaceful parenting, that he was the first parent that wasn't abusive to his children. So this is like extreme cult behavior. This is a man who is not well adjusted, and he gets a lot of people to believe in this, and like to they'll go to this extreme where like like I did this with like things like the gold standard. I would have these like knockdown drag out arguments in bars with my friends about how like, well, if you don't believe in gold, then you're fucking crazy. And then, if you like take a minute and relax, and you look at like, who owns all the golds, then you're like, oh, well, maybe this isn't the best idea on the planet. And again, that's another aspect of this, this like bowing down to this precious metal. It's very occult.
The gold, sure.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people in that sort of part of the liberty movement that is like super. They think that anyone that doesn't believe in that is somehow evil, that they're all these statists, and that, if you don't believe in this really narrow political view, again, we're getting into this, narrow political view, that you are somehow out to hurt them, and that's Molyneux's whole thing, is that, if you believe in taxes, then that means that you want to put a gun to your head, to whatever, your head, and shoot you. Because, that's his whole thing. And he has whole videos about that. That if you believe in taxes, that means that you believe in violence and you want to kill me. So again, if you get, a lot of young, let's face it, I guess, beating up on the libertarian movement, you get a lot of young white males with some money, it's easy to convince them of that. And then you just get into the whole like absolutism, which is just like the essence of like a cult like political ideology.
Yes, yeah, that's a big problem. I see that tendency in so many things, even just beyond cults. But I think the fact that we're sort of tending towards wanting absolute answers and just absolutism as a sort of way to solve our problems is why so many cults are thriving today, and just they're popping up everywhere. It's not just the alternative community; it's just like everywhere you look, as we're saying, like AA or advertising. It's just I mean, is this sort of a, I don't know, is this a psychological way of being? Is this sort of a symptom of the way things are at present? And if that's the case, then what would we even do about this?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure if I have like a great answer for that. But I know what you mean. I mean, this is I think when you start really looking into cults, you'll start to see that there are these sort of pseudo cults, like we were saying, like advertising. You know, people are they're so loyal to like the cigarette brand that they smoke. You know, to the point where you'll look down on people. Oh my God, like they smoke Camel Lights. Like, ugh, like I would never date her. You know what I mean? Like that sort of and it's silly, but it's sort of it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, people do that. People do that.
Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, definitely. You know, I mean, people make fun of people for drinking a certain kind of soda or drinking a certain kind of beer. And I don't know. I think part of it is some desire by the, certainly people like in advertising want that. They want people to be so committed to a particular brand of something that they will go to, crazy extremes if it disappears. God forbid you change the label on something. People will like lose their shit over, something, change. I mean, I get this with, when people like redesign their websites.
Yeah.
I you get that like, ugh, what? I can't believe this.
That's the power of the image.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I remember,
real.
James Corbett updated his website not too long ago, and at first I was like, I fucking hate this. Like, I can't believe he betrayed me like that, And then I had to sort of take a step and be like, I don't think James really did that. Like, he didn't do it out of some nefarious, thing. But that happens all the time. I mean, people become so used to things. So I don't know. I mean, I'm on some level, I think it like that, like the sort of that aspect of the kind of cult-like behavior is almost inevitable in society. I think, factionalism, that's just kind of reality. Yeah. We can never really escape that, but that I think, I would just encourage people to be more aware, again, to be more aware of the destructive aspect of that.
Yes.
Now, it's like, not that, sure, let's rip on people who drink Stella Artois. That's fine. I don't care. But, let's but when you find yourself reading articles like, like on Stormfront or, some of these like crazy neo-Nazi blogs that are out there that are that are popping up more and more in the alt media, or just, when people kind of have these throwaway comments about, not to pick on Molyneux again, but he's always, this Mr. Anti-Status, Mr. Anarchist, sides with the fucking police every time a black kid gets killed. Yeah. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. He will go through these mental and verbal gymnastics to somehow excuse the police.
That's I've seen that. That always blows my mind. I have seen that, not from Molyneux, because I don't follow him at all. I really know nothing about him, but I've seen that from other people. It always makes me go, what? You're defending the state in this case? Yeah. Like, what is that?
Constantly. So when you see that, maybe just take a minute and think, where is this going? What's the direction of this? Yeah. Do you want to be led down that path to where, if it's a young black man getting shot like 80 times, that it's okay? Yeah. That's really scary. That's the kind of danger, happening. And again, it's really shameful that, there are people in the alt community that are doing that to people who, for the most part, are good. There are people that would consider themselves anarchists or libertarians that really are against state violence, but they can be made to think that, well, there's certain instances where it's okay, based on the color of somebody's skin, based on a religious ideology, whatever it may be. So that's really dangerous, and that's really silly, and we should be more, upfront about that. And that's the kind of, that's that sort of factionalism and political ideology that's really dangerous and cult-like.
Sure. it definitely is important to remember the basic human nature involved in this study and why cults are successful, because they're hitting on real human drives and things that motivate us, and things even such as hypnotism and altered states of consciousness are a natural thing. People naturally hypnotize themselves in any given sort of natural setting. People do that, and it has a real necessity. Like, people need to hypnotize themselves and go into this altered state. But because that is a part of our biology, our makeup, it can be exploited. So it's all about exploitation, and there's just so much exploitation out there now. I mean, I guess that's what it comes down to. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, or any other final thoughts? I think we should round this up here, Pearse.
Well, yeah, just that. I mean, that this kind of exploitation is everywhere. You know, I just sort of went on and on about the kind of so-called right, but I mean, on the more sort of hippie angle, I mean, there's this whole thing with ayahuasca right now. There's this whole, in general, psychedelics are some sort of answer that if you take enough shrooms or acid, that somehow, you know, you'll be able to like solve 9/11. It's just sort of, that's the kind of like, you know, that's the sort of base level that is out there, and that these things are happening. And in many ways, and I know you've talked about this, it sort of seems to be coming to a head. There seems to be a sort of buildup of this, and this is what we're seeing with this whole sort of like neo-Nazi thing. I think, again, this is what we're seeing with a lot of the psychedelic movement here, and again, linking it to all sorts of other weird New Age practices with like gurus and things. And just, you know, I think just kind of be aware of this, and again, just don't, you know, you don't have to follow a group. You don't have to. It's a real big problem in the alt media. Is everybody wants a leader?
Yeah.
Everybody wants a guru,
Yeah.
whether they believe it or not. They do. And I think that you know, once you are able to remove yourself from that idea, that you can accomplish a whole lot more. And I'll say that, you know, I know that to be true just with you know, my podcast that I do. You know, I just one day was like, well, you know, I think I could do this. I don't need, you know, you don't need to be on some, you know, big, you know, channel or whatever, you know, or be part of one particular community to make a difference. So I would just kind of encourage that. I know that sounds very cheesy, but that's true. And just again to you know, to realize that cults operate in very subtle manners, and that you could, you know, I would say, just I hope that people listening to this might just sit down and really contemplate, you know, the types of groups that they may be associating with that they didn't think were cults, and to not make excuses to be like, oh, well, it's okay because, you know, but this guy's really good. He's done such great research, you know, oh, but he, you know, he or she said this, that's so amazing, and they're really pushing for a certain whatever new thing, and that's really great. You know, to be like, okay, sure, but, you know, you can do that, you know, and you don't have to also be spouting this crap on the side. Yeah,
and you don't have to be an evangelist like the cult leaders are. They're always the evangelist that has all the answers and are going to save the world. And the truth is that nobody can do that for anybody else. You can only do that for yourself, and there's no such thing as a true evangelist that will save the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess with that, I want to thank you for coming on the show today, Pearse. I'll also say that maybe we'll have to have you back on and keep talking about this more, because I know that I'm sure you have lots more in your notes. So maybe we'll do this again sometime soon, if that sounds good.
Oh, I would absolutely love to, Aaron. I think this whole subject needs to be explored more, and just thank you so much for having me on. I always love talking to you, and your listeners are always very supportive of my show as well. So thank you again.
Yeah, and absolutely. Before we go, I want you to mention your website, of course. So throw out your website and any other interesting material that you have upcoming that listeners will be interested to see.
Sure. So my website is porkinspolicyreview.com. No more of this .wordpress stuff, so just .com. That's great. And yeah, I lately people will notice I haven't been putting out any work in like a month or so. But that will begin again very soon with the regular podcast, as well as Porkins Great Game, which I do with my friend Christoph Gehrman. from BFP. We're gonna probably have a new episode up next week. But the reason I haven't been updating the website with new work is because me and Tom Secker have been very busy working on our new podcast series, The CIA in Hollywood. And Aaron, of course, was a guest on that. We recorded a little while ago. I think a week ago, maybe. Yeah. And that will be coming out hopefully sometime in mid-April. So very soon, and I would definitely go and check it out when it does come out, because I'm really excited about this new series, and we've got terrific guests. We're going to be talking to Thomas Sheridan in a few days, Sibel Edmonds, Adam from Cerebral Revolt, Guillermo Jimenez as well from Traces of Reality. And you can go, if you go to my website, you can find the rundown of all the films that we're discussing and the sort of angles that we're taking. But I'm really excited about that. So that's the newest thing that I'm working on.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing everybody else's interview on that CIA series. I'm definitely looking forward to that. So something to look forward to for the listeners. And thanks again for being here, Pearse.
Of course. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Trans Resistor Radio. Be sure to check out Pearse Redmond's website, PorkinsPolicyReview.com. You're going to want to listen to his podcast as well, which you'll find at that website. So be sure to check that out. I'll have his site and other work of Pearse Redmond posted to ageoftransitions.com in the post for this podcast. So check out my website, Age of Transitions, as well. And yeah, you can find links there. I hope you enjoyed today's interview, and I will say that there will be more interviews coming up in the near future here on Trans Resistor Radio. The future, and generally speaking, my particular personal future here is very uncertain. So I'm not sure in terms of scheduling shows and whatnot. I don't know what to say, what to expect, because I don't know what to expect in terms of my own life. So more on that as things develop, I'll let you know. But for the foreseeable future, we'll keep posting one of these podcasts a week, and I should have another interview episode coming up for you next time. So be sure to keep listening, subscribe to the feed. And if you want to help support me and this show, you can go to ageoftransitions.com, check the products tab at the top, and I have a book for sale. It's available in paperback or ebook formats there. That helps me a lot, book sales. You can also buy new product that I posted, an intangible product, which is an MP3 download. So a digital download of 100 MP3s, actually. And those 100 MP3s are the first 100 episodes of Trans Resistor Radio. So if you've gone to like the podcast and you'd like to go back and listen to the original ones, buy the digital download. It's $10 for the first 100 episodes. So that's a great way to help me out. So once again, the website is ageoftransitions.com. It has everything you need in terms of my material. You can subscribe to this podcast, Trans Resistor Radio, there. You can help support me. You can read articles and see other things that I have posted to the website. And I want to thank you very much for listening. My name is Aaron Franz, and as always, I will close the show by saying, Seeker, seek on.
Honesty, the truth to use on mystery. You stand in front of me, you wanna know my history. Well, and now you're on my line. You know I'm doing fine without you. Oh, girl, so just take that shit away from me. There's nothing left for you to see, my baby. Ooh, baby. I wanna be a transformer.
Today's episode of Trans Resistor Radio was recorded on the 25th of March, 2015.